Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Jay and John. What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
I'm sitting here aboard my Death Star. No, this is not the Death Star. This is just a normal
like
Star
a Destroyer.
Yeah, this is just a normal Star Destroyer.
Yeah. Not enough windows for Death Star.
Accurate. All right. Well, I'm sitting here aboard my Star Destroyer and I'm thinking about objectives. So that's what we're going to talk about today. People have been requesting sort of a objectives 101. How do you approach each objective type cast? We've done episodes on all of the objectives previously, but it's been a while, probably about a year and a half at least. So A, those episodes are kind of hard to find at this point, but B, a lot, some stuff has changed since then, including some actual changes to how you do battle cards. So
Stuff changes all the time with how you have to think about these.
Yep.
Every 6 months, I feel like it's a whole new approach.
For sure. So we're going to revisit them. We're going to see how many we get to. We're not going to do one per episode. We're probably also not going to do all of them today. So
yep.
We'll see how many we get to. And I also wrote an article on this subject because we here at the Fifth Trooper aim to deliver what people want. So people were asking for Objectives 101. So you get a podcast and you get an article. Head over to thefifthtrooper.com/blog to check that out. You got any housekeeping for us, Jay, before we dive in?
Yeah. So for any of you who haven't gotten into Stormtide yet, you're dead to us. That's it. That's the whole housekeeping. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, let's
that's it. Let's move on. Objectives. We're keeping it short tonight, boys. No, listen. So if you haven't had a chance to get into Stormtide yet, this month, October, we're starting season 3, and you as a new player can start at season 3. And so I know a lot of players have said with season 2 that they wanted to catch up on the story and really know what happened in season 1. Well, we're doing this cool mechanic where you'll be able to catch up on the first 2 kind of seasons worth of stories through season 3. So if you haven't joined, now's a great time to join. We're gonna have this first box in October. You're going to get a couple minis for each player. There's going to be a bunch of cool missions. We've got our divergent narrative still going. That's so basically for each of the players, we're telling 2 different stories. So you get to read that, and you have your own missions and objectives and deployments that you have to do based on the story. So it's really cool. We're doing some really great stuff. I'm super excited about it. So ideally I hope you guys can join us. Season 3 right now, you can get in and start playing now with a friend. So that's going. Let's see some other stuff. We have we listed some new products up on the store. So we have our we actually put up some trays. We've got these army trays that can be basically disassembled and fit in any army bag, and we have faction designs on them plus a Fifth Trooper design. And then also you can get it magnetically receptive as well. So if you have magnets on the bottom of your army, they'll stick to the top of these trays. Those are coming in December. And then of course we've got our new we did our not bounty hunter tokens that are not related to bounty hunters at all. The hunter, right? The Hunter series. So those are up as well. And then also we are getting we're teaming up with the Professional Casual Network. They have a Marvel Crisis Protocol podcast. They have a couple Warhammer podcasts. They have a really cool Warhammer RPG podcast. It's really good. But we teamed up with them, and every month we're going to be putting out faction kits for Marvel Crisis Protocol. So for instance, this month we've got the Gold Friends and the Wild Friends, which is basically X-Men Gold Team and Wild Hunt. And so you get 10 of the faction sleeves, you get 3 secure and 3 extraction sleeves, and 6 full color tokens. One's for your victory tracker, and the other ones are like stake tokens for the game. So those are all up on the website too. So we got a ton of new product, and we're going to be coming out with new sleeve designs every 2 new factions every month of those. And you can them on our website. And that's so yeah, we're trying to get into the MCP arena a little bit and do some cool stuff there. So yeah, a bunch of great new product. And then as always, I'm really excited. We entered we've hit 2 of our stretch goals on our Patreon. So we just did our first live Q&A since we reached that stretch goal again. That was a ton of fun. Kyle, Evan, and I did that. God, we probably had like 20 people live, I think, at one point, which was pretty cool. And then, so you could come on, hang out with us, ask questions, talk, that was great. And then we also started our tactics, monthly tactics from the Scoundrels, which we're going to be doing pre-recorded ones. I cheated. This month was my month, and I cheated a little bit, and I did our Legion in 60 seconds series that I've been wanting to do, and this kind of gave me the push to do it.
That totally counts.
Yeah, sure. It's not really in-depth tactic, but it was fine. But yeah, we'll be doing different ones. I got to get Kyle all set up so he can learn how to work a computer.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
But we're going to be having more of those, and then of course our Legion in 60 seconds series. I'm going to be putting out those. I want to be conservative and say every couple weeks. I'd like to do it weekly. They're not terribly a ton of work to put out, and people seem to enjoy it. So if I can get a couple recorded at a time, I'll probably start putting them out pretty regularly. So that was pretty cool. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel. And basically I'm going to try to explain pieces of the Legion rules in 60 seconds. That's the whole concept. My favorite was people were like, well, you didn't go in depth on suppression about droids. And I'm just like, yeah, man, it's 60 seconds. Like, I'm just going to stick with the core rules, But yeah, other than that, really good feedback. So I'll keep doing those, and hopefully that helps newer players, or if you're trying to get your friend or somebody in, and you can toss them a couple of these 60-second videos that explains, first one we did is suppression, the next one I'm going to do is cover. So, we'll just 60 seconds try to explain that to the best of my ability and throw a little levity in there and humor, and it'll be good.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah,
it.
Sweet.
I'm very excited to record something. I do know how to use a computer. I actually built this one that I'm recording this on. But what I don't know how to do is record anything.
That's
so
exactly what somebody who doesn't know how to use computers would say.
There are specific things on computers that I do not know how to do.
Yeah.
And recording is one of them. So Jay's going to teach me.
Yep.
We've been doing this podcast for 3 years.
4
4
2018, right?
Yeah, 4 years. Wow.
It's 4 years this month. It's like right now is 4 years, I think. I think we're like skipping right over our anniversary.
Yeah. And I've through all the various ebbs and flows of that 4 years, I have been very lucky. All I've had to do is talk. Show up and talk. So 4 years into being a podcast host, I'm finally learning how to record something.
It's okay. You're in charge of the blog. That's
hey, you don't need that is WordPress. I can
The
do
blog
that.
is a lot of work
yeah.
to keep
I can
putting
write
out
stuff.
articles for as long and consistently as you've been getting them put out.
Yeah, 4 years of more than 4 years for the blog, actually.
Do we know how many articles total we have?
Well, yeah. Hold on.
How many hundreds?
I could probably get that.
I mean, it's at least one a week for 4 years.
Somebody vamp. Somebody vamp
200.
while I'm doing this. This isn't working.
You can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/thefifthtrooper. Did I get that link right this time?
I think you did.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah,
You did.
Awesome.
All right,
Nice.
so we have, all in all, we have 317 published articles on our website.
317.
That's a lot.
You have to, and that's Kyle moved his blog over when he came over, plus kept writing for us, plus everybody that was right. And then what was it, the
Jedi Journal.
Jedi Journal.
Yeah.
We moved them over. So we, it's there's a lot of content.
I think
On
I
the
wrote like
website.
one of them in there.
Hey,
One
nice.
out of 317.
You've written at least one. I think you've written more
Yeah.
than one. I don't know.
Good job.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about objectives. So how about we just dive right in?
All right.
Before we get to like specific objectives, I just want to do a quick sort of high level overview about why do we even care? Why are we talking about this? So the most obvious reason is that Legion is literally won or lost based on the objectives. Right, like you can technically, it's possible to table your opponent, but that's never like a plan A, or it shouldn't be.
No.
In my experience, that's something that kind of happens when one player is already losing on objectives and they're kind of forced to just take a bunch of like crazy risks.
Hail Marys.
Yeah. And then when one player starts pitching Hail Marys, that's when you potentially get like a tabling situation. But you essentially use the objectives to set up that situation where your opponent has to take more risks than you, basically. So we've talked on this cast before about game flow. I think we've used there's like a Magic the Gathering term, the beatdown and the control. We did an episode on that a while back, which you can probably search for on our site. We won't get into like super detail on this episode because we did that on another episode, but the short version is like when you start the game, based on what objective you've selected and what other battle cards you end up with, and what your list looks like and what your opponent's list looks like, and whether you're red or blue. There's basically one player for whom like the status quo is more acceptable than the other. Generally, there are exceptions to this, or there's situations where it's not like obvious. But generally speaking, like if the game kind of proceeds as you expect it to and nothing crazy happens, one player is going to have a better chance to win than the other, based on all of those things we listed. And how you set up being in that driver's seat is objectives. So that's why this whole thing is important. You guys have anything else on that topic?
Nope.
It's funny because you said that, and I really think about that. Is you're right. I wonder if you could try that. Sorry, I don't mean to elongate this and make this longer.
Yeah, no.
But I've never
please.
Actually, even playing double heavies, I've never set out to be like, I'm just going to table my opponent this game. Like that's never been even.
It's so hard and it's
Yeah.
so easy to deny.
So I
just
have,
hide a single model from LOS and then
I've sort of done it. It's hard to like do that and also just completely ignore the objectives because your opponent's units are going to be near their objectives, right? I have done that specifically with the list that I ran at SoCal, which was the double airspeeder, triple Wookiee list. There was more than one game with that list where I was just like, my opponent's army is here. Clearly, I think there was like a VAPS game where I'm like, clearly I'm going to have my naked units in the back, like do my VAPS because, they should. But like my opponent's army is near his VAPS and I'm just going to go after him and kill everything. And he's probably, hopefully somewhere in there, I'm either going to kill everything or he's not going to be able to tap his VAPS. And that's what happened. So yeah, it isn't. There are certain like hyper aggro lists where I think you can kind of go in with that mindset where like maybe you're not looking to just straight win by table, but you have a sense that like you're going to get so up in their face and do so much damage that the objective are essentially not going to matter, because at the end of the day all of the objectives with the slight weirdness of possibly the bombing run, involve counting unit leaders in some fashion or unit leaders doing something important with objectives. So there's ones that just literally count unit leaders. I like to think of those as the counting objectives. So that's like breakthrough, intercept, KP. What am I missing? Besides a dog on John's shoulder. I'm
Payload.
missing one. Payload. Yep. So all of those like literally count unit leaders in a specific part of the table, whether it's deployment zone or like near the payload or whatever. And you can't score if you don't have unit leaders to count. So,
Right.
like killing things, even if you don't fully or table your opponent, is still helpful there. And then the other ones, I like to call them thumbs objectives, but basically they're objectives that require interacting with, and that's sabotage, recover, and hostage. And sometimes bombing run if bombs end up getting dropped without getting blown up, which happens periodically. But those ones, like activation count, is slightly less important because you're interacting with objectives instead of just counting unit leaders. But you still need units with thumbs to do those things, and if your opponent kills all your units with thumbs, then you can't. So killing stuff is important.
Yep.
I don't want to like go through this whole discussion without acknowledging that at the end of the day, scoring objectives generally requires you to go after your opponent's units in order to prevent them from scoring objectives, or to
Yeah.
limit their ability to prevent you
Right.
from scoring yours.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, it's more of a symptom, right, of like what you're trying to accomplish. It's not something you're specifically like, because what, like in 40K, right, sometimes it's just about like just killing all your opponent's units, and like this never seems to be the objective of this. It's like, oh, because of the objectives, right, you just like, oh, I'm just gonna get this done and then I win, and there we go.
Yeah, it's something that kind of happens.
I feel like there's definitely two objectives that I always have in mind when I'm playing. One, whatever the selected objective was, and two, eliminating my opponent's firepower. Like I'm trying to do both of those simultaneously always.
Yep.
For the reasons Kyle mentioned, so that they can't stop you from doing the objective, and so you can stop them.
Yep.
So it's trying to strike the balance between those two, and that balance is very different for all 8 of these objectives.
Yeah.
Well, most of them are different from each other. Some of them are not.
Some of them are kind of similar, but even the ones that are like, I would say breakthrough and bombing run are kind of similar, but even those have important nuances to them that are very different from each other.
Yeah.
So all right, so we're going to walk through these kind of in people are always asking like, where are these objective cards? And this is a 101 segment, so we're going to walk through these basically grouped by where you can find them. So there's essentially 3 places for that. There's one of the core sets, either the Clone Wars core set or the Galactic Civil War core set / OG core set, and there's 4 objectives in there. We're going to hit those today. We may or may not get to the vital assets objectives. There's 3 in there, and then there's 1 objective in the priority supplies expansion, which is sabotage. And of course, priority supplies also comes with a bunch of plastic for other objectives, but you can also get the core set objectives plus sabotage in the essentials kit. That will not have the plastic from priority supplies, but it does have all 5 of those cards. So the essentials kit has all of basically the non-vital assets objectives in it. So there was some really awesome range rulers. Have we talked about those range rulers on this cast?
No, but they're much better.
Oh my gosh. Like I wish I had one handy. I would have to go dig them out.
Huge.
They're huge. They're thick.
Chunky.
They're very chunky. What is that face for, Jay?
I don't know, just so weird. Maybe this for the After Dark episode, boys.
It is an accurate adjective
phrasing. Do we need
for
phrasing?
those
Yeah.
range rulers.
They have they are the same length, of course, otherwise that would be silly. That there were some pictures like circulating when this first came out of somebody took like it was basically like an optical illusion that made the essentials get range rulers look longer. They are not longer. They are the same length as the original range rulers.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
Kyle like, "Oh, do you got any in stock? Take a look, measure them." It's like, okay, no, they're the same.
Yeah, they're the same. All of my old ones snapped, so I ended up getting an essentials kit just basically just for the range rulers anyway. And it does come with 6 in there, so that's all you will need.
Yeah.
But they not only are they thicker, but the connection points are also like wider and shaped differently, so they don't break.
Yeah.
I want to say they don't break as easily because I'm sure there's a way to break them, but
Yeah.
I have yet to see someone break.
They're
one of
like
the
built to
essentials kit
flex
range
without
rulers.
snapping.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
just they stay straighter too when you hold them out.
Yeah, I think it's just the process of how the plastic, like it feels like a different plastic too, and I think in the early days they were using that softer plastic that all the
Mhm.
minis were made out of, and then
Yeah.
this is more of a really like pressed plastic, so that's good. No, hey, want to talk about positives? These range rulers are super positive.
For sure.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than painting all your range rulers like I did, and then going to Nova and breaking 3 of them, and then
Yeah.
going, "Are you kidding me with this?" Like, oh, that's so annoying.
And I would sometimes have them break off like when you're in the middle of a measurement. Like I'd flick it out to do a measurement and then it would break and then it'd go like spinning across the table. I'd be like,
Yep.
I promise
Jeez.
I play this game a lot.
I will say though, it's odd. I haven't played with the larger ones on the table yet, but they feel like they're going to take some getting used to as far as like putting them near your minis and stuff without like bumping things. Like the other ones just seemed, the smaller, they were just easier to like maneuver in and out of stuff. But
I didn't have much trouble with that. I did notice that because the connection points are thicker, they stick together
Mm.
a little more. So like when you're pulling them apart, you got to be a little rougher with them, which is fine. The reason they're like that is because they don't break as easily. But you do have to like yank on them a little bit when you're pulling the segments apart. I'm sure that'll ease up as I use them more. But anyway,
such a weird podcast. Yeah.
I think someone
do we just need
in this
like a
trio
phrasing,
has their
Jeff?
mind in the gutter tonight, and it's not me and Kyle.
All right. Comment. You tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe I am.
All right. Let's try and recover here and get to the objectives. Do you see what I did there?
Yeah. You're doing great.
We're starting with recover the supplies.
No, actually, I want to start with deployments real quick.
Boo, boo this
That's
man.
not an objective.
No, but they relate to the objectives in ways that are very important.
They are.
I just super quick.
All right.
I always think of, I just want to group them. So I always think of deployments as either long edge to long edge, which means they go along the 6-foot edge of the table, battle lines being the classic example. Short edge to short edge, meaning they go along the short edges, or diagonal. So long edge to long edge is battle lines, danger close, disarray, hemmed in.
Which one's danger close?
I know that danger close is technically more than one table edge.
Yeah.
I personally consider it a long edge to long edge.
Okay.
Because,
I agree.
Most people deploy in those zones that are on the long edges.
The short edge being only range 1 away from that short edge means you're extremely far away from the action, so they end up not getting like used hardly at all.
There
So I
are
agree with you.
situations
Long
where that
edge.
happens.
Yeah.
Particularly like VAPs sometimes.
Sure.
But other than that, yeah, that short edge does not get used as much. So I consider that a long edge to long edge deployment.
Okay.
Even though it's sort of a hybrid. Diagonals, which is long march, diagonals is major offensive and advanced positions, and then short edge to short edge is long march and rollout. So
where'd you put disarray?
I put disarray in long edge to long edge.
Okay.
Even though you're on offset long edges,
Yeah.
you're still, you know.
Yeah.
Um. Anyway, the long edge to long edge deployments tend to favor units that are more mobile and or aggressive. The diagonal and short edge deployments tend to favor objectives and or lists that are more defensive and or less mobile. So quick little 2-minute thing on deployments as we go through these. All right, now let's talk about objectives.
Oh,
Should
now are you ready?
Yeah,
That was
Should-
the primer for the objectives.
yeah, that's the primer. And then so how about let's do recover first, because otherwise
Okay.
we ruined that segue, Jack. Which I already did by talking about
Yeah,
deployments for 3 minutes.
This whole thing's ruined. Not even gonna put up this podcast.
Might as well just start over.
Yeah.
Start from the top.
Yep.
All right, let's start with recover.
All right, so this is a 101 section. So recover is basically you get 5 boxes. You place 2, your opponent places 2, and then 1 goes in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You interact with said boxes by using the claim action,
Mm-hmm.
which is an action that a unit with thumbs, a trooper unit that is not a creature trooper or an emplacement trooper, a small base trooper mini, basically. When we say thumbs, that's what we mean, small base trooper mini. Has to pick up said box. Whoever has the most boxes at the end of the game wins. Very simple, at least from a rules perspective. How do you, so why don't we first talk about like sort of what units and or lists are good at each objective and which ones are bad, and then we can hit like how you approach it. So what units are really good at recover?
Units that can Jedi.
Yeah.
Honestly, Jedi are amazing because the middle box is the biggest swing of this, because there's an odd number.
Right.
Whoever can control the middle box in general is gonna win. In general, you can keep the 2 that you placed in safe positions away from the enemy, and it's a fight over the middle. So Jedi, because of force push and because they're melee and burst of speed now, like they have lots of tools to just stick with whoever grabs the box first and not let go of them. And then kill them.
Yeah, that's all true.
They're pretty good at grabbing it themselves too, if they need to.
Yeah.
Especially Darth Maul.
Yeah.
Can we have like a separate category for Darth Maul because of how ridiculously good he is at recover?
Mm-hmm.
So what makes him so good at recover?
2 things. Both versions of Maul, Julia Mastery.
Okay. Double
Because
move and pick up.
double move and grab, or grab and double move away.
Yeah.
And then with Shadow Collective Maul, he can get cunning, which allows him to basically guarantee a last first, which means that you go last with Maul to double move to the box, you grab it, and then you play a 1-pip with cunning to immediately go first with Maul. And one of his 1-pips gives him disengage. So if, somehow he ends up in melee, you can play that and also get away with the box
Right.
via a double move. So Darth Maul is just really good at recovery. He also often, particularly the Shadow Collective version, has choke. And force choke can be used to, you pick a particular mini with force choke, which means you can pick a unit leader that is carrying a box and choke that unit leader, and then they drop the box if it's a single wound model. So force choke units with force choke are also good at recover for that reason. Although I will say it is generally uncommon, at least on recover, to like, I'd say this is much more of a thing with hostage, where it's much more common for single wound minis to actually have an objective. I would say at least with the middle box, it's pretty uncommon for like a random trooper unit with a bunch of single wound bottles to grab it. But
Yeah, you don't really send those smaller units because you just expect them to get lit up and
yeah,
die, because that's where everyone's firepower is pointed.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so Maul is very good because his triple action.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
Yoda's
Mhm.
extremely good at making anyone go and pick it up
Yeah, with guidance.
with guidance, even on his 1-pip double guidance to give someone a 4-action turn. Um, it's it's gross, but it's very relevant. And I played a lot of Yoda Wookiees, and the Wookiees can double move to the box, and then Yoda tells them to pick it up and move back. And now Wookiees have the box.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
good.
I find with one of the things with force users that can sometimes your opponent doesn't see as much is they'll start loading up like the middle box to go after it, and they won't pay as much attention to one of the boxes they deem as safe. And you can get a force user with like burst of speed and the right deployment. You could get them over to one of their boxes and really
Yep.
cause a problem in the backfield for them.
It is definitely, yeah, definitely a non-0% of my games. I've had those supposedly safe boxes not be so safe, either my
Yeah.
own or my opponent's. It's a factor of the deployment zones and the terrain on that table.
Very much.
Something to very much keep in mind when you're deploying and choosing where to put those boxes.
And sometimes, like if you have a list where you want to slug it out with your opponent and you're on a deployment like battle lines, sometimes you can kind of just decide that the fight is going to be about those safe boxes. I had a game like this with Palpatine way back at the 2019 Nova Open, where like the middle of the table was super open, and I'm like, all right, well, and my opponent had Luke, so he was going to be much better at actually getting in there. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to be able to grab that box. Luke is probably not going to be able to grab that box without getting shot a lot. So I'm just going to pretend it's not there. And, you know, my opponent put his quote unquote safe box in a spot on battle lines, and I put my first safe box immediately opposite that box. And then he put his second box near his first box, and I put my second box right immediately opposite that box. And basically I'm like, all right, we're going to play on a 3x3. And Palpatine went in there and Jazz handed everything, and you know, like nobody ever claimed that middle box.
Man.
But I would say that that kind of situation is certainly less common, but
Definitely, yeah, out of the norm.
Yeah,
I agree.
But there are situations where you can make it about the safe boxes, and players tend to claim those safe boxes with units that are more fragile, whether they're like naked core units or strike teams or something. So if you have something fast like bikes or creature troopers or whatever, sometimes they can get around, and or infiltrators, you know, sometimes they can get around and threaten those safe boxes. So
yeah, infiltrate is definitely something worth talking about for recover. It is, if you are blue player infiltrate, it is a great way to grab that middle box if your opponent doesn't have a Jedi. I do not recommend it against an opponent that has a Jedi when you don't.
Because they could be able to catch you.
Yeah.
Now, why do you say as blue player?
Burst. As blue player, because you can get edged out of your infiltrate bubble, right? So most deployments, I think, in fact, all except Long March have deployments that dip into within range 3 of the center, and infiltrate requires you to be range 3 or more away from enemy units. So if you're not blue player, if you're red player and you get second deployment, all blue player has to do to deny the infiltrate is place a model within range 3 of the center, and now you can't infiltrate in base contact with the middle box.
Yeah, and if you are blue player and you don't have infiltrators and your opponent has infiltrators, that's something that you want to be mindful of with your first drop, is you want to zone that box pretty much immediately.
Yes. But infiltrate, like you were saying earlier, as blue or red player, can also instead be used to threaten safe boxes.
Right.
Safe boxes, and
Quote,
those
unquote,
might
safe,
be
I like to call them home boxes.
There you go. Yeah. Those might be better to infiltrate towards the end of deployment when your opponent has less units to react to your infiltrating.
So just to be clear, you guys want to infiltrate someone's home box?
Well, yes.
No. Not directly.
Hmm.
I see what you're getting at here, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want to actually drop an infiltrator on top of your opponent's home box. You want to put them kind of near those home boxes.
Yeah,
You know,
this
like
is all
if-
terrain dependent.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna infiltrate someone in range 2 of your deployment out in the open where everything can shoot
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
I
But
just
I'm
wanted
gonna
to
get close to
clarify.
that box.
Yeah, no, this is a 101 segment, Jay, so that's very relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you have Jin and Inferno, you might drop them roughly range 3 from one of those boxes, so that when your opponent tries to move a unit over there to get it, and then you can shoot them. You're not going to necessarily
Right.
be claiming those boxes with your infiltrators. You're just going to be making it more difficult for your opponent to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What about Mandalorians? Like Mr. Fett.
Yeah.
Boba Fett is what, top 3 for doing that middle box.
Yeah, he's up there. I'd say he's better than
extremely
some
good.
Force users at it.
Yes, better than most Force users, I
Yeah.
think.
Here's a 101 for all of you at home. One of my favorite moves in this. You want the best of both worlds? You grab Vader, you put him with Boba, you do a new ways to motivate on him, and he can
Yep.
move, grab, move, get the box and get out of there. And if you have the right terrain, there's not a lot anybody can do about that.
Yep.
Yeah, and obviously Boba, besides being super fast, also has whipcord, which both lets him potentially freeze. Like if your opponent gets to it first, he can freeze a unit right there with the box for you to then shoot it. But if he gets to it first and someone tries to tie him up in melee to keep him there, he can just whipcord and get out of there. So I would recommend, if you're running Boba Fett, if you're running Boba Fett, you should be running Recover in your deck. And B, you should be running Recon Intel on Boba Fett.
And
It's
whipcord.
and Whipcord for sure. I don't know why you would ever take. Can we just talk about like
Still worth saying because
Yeah,
we've seen it.
right. We have seen it. Never take Boba Fett without Whipcord. If you're taking Boba Fett, Whipcord should be like, I mean, he will at some point have 6 command cards. If you take 1 command card, take Whipcord, please, people. Like, it's his best command card. Anyway, yeah, give him recon intel. It's generally good, but on Recover, it's especially good because on a lot of the deployments, you can actually put him before the game starts within a speed 3 move in the middle box with recon intel. So
Yes.
You know what I really like on Boba too is what's it called? Environmental gear. And here's a little 101. Jump generally is only for one action, so one movement action. So then you've got the second movement, and a lot of people make the mistake of like early on when you first start playing, you're like, oh, I got jump, I'll be fine. But then you then put him in front of, let's say, a barricade or near a barricade where you need to get across it. Well, you don't have jump anymore, so now you're having your speed, you're going to have your speed. So what I like to do is put environmental gear, because then he just moves over that stuff too. So then it's like effectively having 2 versions of jump, as long as it's half your height or lower.
Yeah, when you've got an 8-inch move, like there's a pretty high probability that your quickest path to where you want to go is going to go over difficult terrain.
Yeah.
So environmental gear, definitely valid. And he has 2 gear slots, right?
Yeah.
and it's
So
not expensive.
recon intel, environmental gear, totally reasonable.
Yep. Are there any units that are bad at Recover?
Yes. Things that can't pick them up. Creature troopers. But they have uses. Both creature troopers are great at just flanking and murdering your opponent's home boxes. With
Scout
their
troopers
crazy movement.
are bad for the middle objective, good for your home
Okay, yeah.
objective.
Yeah, you don't want to try and scout onto the middle objective.
But 101, right? So let's say you're playing Civil War era and you've got snipers. A lot of what we do veteran players is we put our home boxes close enough to our snipers that they grab those and kind of secure those in the backfield. As long as you keep your backfield relatively safe, that's great. It's a great position to have. I do know sometimes though people will stretch their snipers out a little too far and then they become weak for infiltrate or fast Jedi or speeders coming up and shooting them, and making them drop the box. So it's you got to make sure you can do it in a way where it's safe, where you keep your box, but it's a good way to secure your back objectives.
Oh, I do kind of want to, talking about the scout troopers in your home objectives, I do want to dip a tiny bit into 102 for this, just because it's something that it took me a long time to get used to doing, and I made the mistake a lot. So a speed 2 on a small trooper unit is less than range 1, just barely, but it's less than range 1.
Yep.
And all these boxes have to be placed beyond range 1. So it's very common to think, oh, I'll put it at range 1 because it's as close to me as I can. But then you're stuck with this awkward, I move a full move towards it, and then my second move is a wasted move. It's a half an inch of a move. So what I suggest is instead of placing them at exactly range 1, oftentimes it's better to place them, like range 1.5 or range 1 or less than range 2 away, because you're expecting 2 moves to get there.
Right.
But in a place where you're going to have cover, where you want to set up shop, where you want to be. But placing them exactly at range 1 often wastes an action for you. That's my 102.
I agree.
That was a good one.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to say about recover?
No, I think we've said a lot.
All right.
Does there need to be anything else?
No.
Good Lord.
Okay. Breakthrough.
Yeah, get across the line. Bingo, bango, bongo. I think
Or don't.
Or yeah, that's true. Real quick, and I'll let John explain what he's talking about. But just for new players to know, you don't have to keep your deployment markers on the table. You can pick them up. So then your opponent has to measure.
That's a jerk move
Yeah.
to do.
But
I mean,
it's facts, isn't it?
It's facts.
You're not wrong. Yeah.
I keep my markers on the table.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're not the competitive podcast anymore.
That's a considerate.
That's
being
Now
considerate.
we're the Sesame Street podcast.
Do we need to talk? I don't want to get into a sportsmanship rabbit hole on this one.
I keep them up for bombing run and breakthrough.
And if my opponent has secret mission, I keep them up.
I keep them up
I
as
think I do
well.
too.
I'm not saying I do it. I'm saying that if someone
right.
pulls their markers, they're perfectly within. I've seen actual fights at tournaments about that, and it's like, no, he can pull them if he wants. Like, he doesn't have to keep them out. That's just something.
Can your opponent then use their own markers and redraw your deployment zone with their own markers?
I think they can. I don't think there's anything against that.
So then you're both just wasting time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's all I'm about, really. This is chaotic neutral Jay tonight.
Yeah, please don't do that, people. Please leave your markers up. Anyway, what units are good at it? Breakthrough.
Fast units.
Yeah.
And most vehicles are good at it because all vehicles are on a larger than small base.
Yep.
Which means, is it every vehicle? Does every vehicle move faster than a small trooper? I think so.
Yeah.
Even at speed, there's nothing speed 1 medium base.
There's nothing that is a speeder bike size base with speed 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything moves faster than a trooper, every vehicle. And they count for breakthrough.
Right. It's not a thumbs objective. It's an everything objective. So
they count for breakthrough, and they're generally harder to kill unless they're speeders. They generally have A lot of them have armor, which means crits only.
Yeah, that's I was gonna point out, like, with especially speeder bikes, or even if you're gonna use the swoop bikes or something like that, in a breakthrough scenario, a lot of times I'll hold them back and circle around.
Yes.
You just circle, right? And then you break through when your opponent can't do anything about it, right? That's generally how you want to play them.
Breakthrough, like key positions, is unique in that only the final round matters.
Yep.
So getting there quickly, it's not,
Doesn't help you.
it's generally counterproductive because it's your opponent's deployment zone, and that's probably where they are.
Now, if I think there are two situations where you potentially want to do that. The first is if you can sort of safely kill something on a flank with your bikes. And that's always helpful, regardless of what the objective is. The second is like if you have infiltrators, you might want to consider, it's very deployment dependent. But if you've got a long edge to long edge deployment, which tends to spread the action out a little bit more, you could consider like dropping them as a late drop, so that you make sure your opponent doesn't have a lot of units over there, but you could consider dropping them kind of near your opponent's deployment zone and in a better position to score than like a normal trooper unit would be. You probably don't want to drop them in your opponent's deployment zone. But somewhere that is in a little more forward than like a normal trooper unit. So infiltrators, I also like on breakthrough, especially as if I'm running breakthrough, I'm probably running those long edge to long edge deployments. Just because if you're running breakthrough, that means you probably have units like speeders or vehicles or infiltrators, and that's going to make breakthrough easier for you and more awkward / complicated for somebody that doesn't have those units. So
Breakthrough, a lot like key positions, it's in my head, there's like a ticking timer, a countdown timer, or I don't know how to describe it, where you have to decide if you're going to go for breakthrough or not. Key positions, you don't get to decide, you have to go for it. But breakthrough you could win if no one scores, and just by killing your opponent's models more than he kills of yours or she kills. But breakthrough, since it typically takes a lot of actions, a lot of movement actions to get there, you need to be consciously aware of how many actions is it going to take me to get across there with these units, and how many actions do I have left in the game. If we're in round 4, then I've got 6 actions left. Am I within 6 moves? And do I want to commit all 6 moves to get there? So in general, to keep your options open, move shooting is, so long as you like stay positive in the attrition game, move shooting towards your opponent's deployment zone is ideal.
Well, I'm glad you talked about the attrition game, because breakthrough is a straight counting objective. And you need to compare your activations to your opponents. And if your opponent has more activations than you, or you're red and they're blue and they have the same, then that's a situation where the status quo is going to be more acceptable to the person with more activations, simply because if nothing dies and both players successfully move all their units to the end zone, whoever has more activations on the table is going to win. And you see this a lot with breakthrough, where especially on deployments like disarray or battle lines, you get like a toilet bowl situation where the armies kind of move like 2 ships passing in the night, where like they both kind of move towards their opponent's zone, but like around each other. Maybe you take some pot shots in there somewhere. And whenever I see that, I'm like, one of these players has clearly failed to understand their role in this situation.
Yes.
Because like, if there's never a situation where if both players score all their units, you tie. That's not a thing that happens. clearly, if you can pick off a unit somewhere in that toilet bowl situation, that changes the calculus. But like,
For the 101, in the only scenario that people might think is a tie, like if you're 10x to 10x and you both score all 10, blue player wins.
if nothing
So
dies.
and nothing
Yeah.
dies. So yeah, no tie.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen where players toilet bowl, and then blue players like, all right, we're at 10-10, and the kill points are 0-0, and that's a W for me. Like,
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're in a situation where you're toilet bowling and neither of you is interacting with the other player's units, somebody is doing something wrong.
Yeah, take a look at the situation. Take a look at activation counts again.
Yep.
Take a look at, are you red or are you blue?
Right. Okay. Anything else to say about breakthrough?
Break on through. You got it.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you kind of have to assess, like, either you have a list with mobile units in it or you don't. And if you don't, you kind of need to get moving. You need to make a decision, like you said, John. You need to either get moving, or just kind of decide that you're going to try and prevent your opponent from scoring any units. The latter is kind of risky and very deployment dependent, because if your opponent scores one unit, then you lose 1-0.
Yes.
So I find that this works better on deployments like Long March or Rollout, where you have a shorter, narrower zone to defend.
Major offensive.
Yeah.
It's very concentrated corner to corner.
If it's like a big spread out zone,
and there's less flanks, less opportunity to flank.
Right. If it's a big spread out zone with flanks, you're not going to be able to do that on battle lines. So. All right. KP, key positions.
KP. I've been playing a lot of KP lately.
Yeah.
I feel like my last 5 games have been KP.
Well, it's really funny. And I guess we can get into this with KP, but like sometimes you look at stats about which objectives gets played the most in a given tournament. KP is always one that gets played super often.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'd like to point out real
go
quick.
ahead.
If you bought one of the original boxes, you have the wrong KP. So if you have
was it fixed by Clone Wars time?
For Clone Wars, yes, but
okay.
not in the Civil War boxes that are in the wild. So if you bought a Civil War box and you have key positions, that's been errated. So please look that up. It spreads out the key positions a little bit more.
It plays very differently.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily they errated that one quickly.
Yeah.
I think there were only 2 tournaments, the Gen Con and Nova Open in 2018, that were played with the original KP.
I think LVO had it.
Really?
Didn't LVO 2019 have it?
I don't think so. I think
No.
I judged for LVO 2019.
Right.
And I remember
It was errated.
That it was
Okay.
errated before then, because I remember thinking when I was setting up terrain about which ones were going to be the center KP.
Yeah, and somebody,
Gotcha.
maybe Freeman, somebody handed out the printed erratic
That's right.
cards.
That's right.
So yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it was within like probably 3 months of the game releasing, or at least the tournament
Yeah.
getting started. That,
Whoops.
the erratic card. Yeah, for the
What was
uninitiated-
happening? Yeah,
Go
for
ahead,
it.
John.
Okay.
Somebody.
Well, what was happening is blue player got to place the first and third key position. So they would place them both on their side. They would have 2 home objectives to red player's 1. And red player was forced to be aggressive or just lose.
Yeah, it was real bad for red. So,
And
they
now
fixed
it's
that
a
one real
center.
quick. Yeah, now it is. Now each player places 1, and then the third objective is whatever the terrain piece is that's closest to the center. So
Yes.
TOs, keep this in mind when you're building tables. I know I've seen tournaments where there's like a giant terrain piece in the center of the table or something like that. Please don't do that.
Yeah. There's a lot of, there's a lot. It doesn't have to be like a perfectly centered terrain piece.
Right.
It's okay if it's skewed to one corner or another, because that's part of the battle
That's
of
part of the
table side decision. But yeah, if it's also like if it's 3 inches, 4 inches towards one deployment and there's nothing else contending with it, then that is a pretty hard skew, and I would avoid that.
Yeah, it can
And
be a
yeah,
little off center.
yeah, don't make it too huge so it's uninteractive.
Yeah.
Building tables is tough.
It is.
It is the most exhausting part of going to tournaments. I always get roped into it.
If
Anyway.
I remember correctly, there wasn't a range one either between them, right? Before.
I don't think so.
There
Yeah.
wasn't. No.
Yeah.
There's an obnoxious photo from Gen Con 2018 where somebody used two barricades that were right next to each other. And they were technically two separate terrain pieces.
Yeah,
Man.
Yeah, it was not good. Anyway, they fixed it quickly. So this is what we have now, and I think it is one of the, if not the most, like, quote unquote neutral objective, in that every unit can score on KP.
Yeah.
The place you need to reach is, the most important place you need to reach is in the middle of the table. So there's not really anything that's like specifically bad at KP. There are a couple of units that are slightly better at it, specifically force users and vehicles.
Big bases that take up space.
Yep. Vehicles can block, which you need to be mindful of if your KP is something flat like a crater. I don't like KPs like that because, you like really big bases like the heavies.
AAT.
It's technically legal for them to fully overlap a KP. There's a forum ruling on this somewhere, but basically the key position token, which is an objective token, is just a marker for a terrain piece in KP. So you can overlap the KP token.
Yeah,
with
it's
units,
the only
including
objective
vehicles.
token that can be overlapped.
Right. Because it's not actually an objective in
Right.
KP. It's just a marker, basically. So yeah, keep that in mind if you're dealing with a center KP that's like small and flat. But force users are good at it because force users are good at controlling an area, and this is of course an
Pushing
area,
people off round
pushing
6.
people off. You're right there, Jay.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
know it's late. We're we're talking about objectives 101.
Ah.
As
So,
I
yeah.
play loot games, often I'll, like, on key positions, very often I'll save one of Luke's 1-pips, Serve Your Master Well or Son of Skywalker, for round 6.
Yep.
And he can swing it by like 3 by either Son of Skywalker killing something, getting into base himself, and pushing someone off. Or Serve Your Master Well telling someone to walk away and pushing someone off and getting there himself.
Yeah, there's a couple force users
And
that
killing
can pull
them.
some silly combos like that. Dooku. I like either his 1-pip or his 3-pip let you do this with multiple units, but you can force push one. Sometimes you can just straight up kill one with a lightsaber swing. If you play his 1-pip, you also get a ranged attack, which you can use to scatter the non-unit leader minis off the KP, and then you choke the unit leader. So that's 3 for Dooku. My favorite one is "And Now You Will Die."
Yeah.
If I'm playing Palpatine, "And Now You Will Die," it's like a turn 5 or 6 play, but you just like freeze 4 to 5 units in place because it hands out immobilized tokens.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, all right.
Yoda too, right? Like he can double force push.
Yep.
Like, so
Yep.
he could potentially kill something and then force push 2 other units off of the KP.
He has to spend an action to recover to do it.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Because he doesn't just auto get it back, but he can do it twice on his 1-pip.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Very relevant.
Yeah, so force users are super good at this. I do the same thing with Vader. I usually save one of his 1-pips for that. Vader's Might and Implacable are both graded the final round for KP. So but yeah, nothing is like, everything is potentially a scoring unit in KP. Even weak units like sniper strike teams, like somebody's got to score your home objective.
Yeah.
So
The weaker units that aren't going to survive the scrum,
right.
generally, 1 or 2 of them stay in the back. And this is, like, I kind of mentioned it when we were talking about breakthrough. This is another one where come turn 4 and 5, you need to be very extremely aware of how many units you can get to the middle and how many moves they have to do to get there, and how many your opponent can get to the middle. Because often it's like around 6, everyone's moving.
Yeah, and there's benefit on KP to kind of push up the turn before the last turn. Because on the last turn, it is beneficial generally to be able to single move to score instead of having to double move, because if you can do that, A, you're less vulnerable to losing actions for some reason like suppression. But B, you can move and then shoot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're in a situation where like one player is roughly range 2 from the objective and the other player is range 1, all their units can move and then shoot your units as you're double moving them to the center.
And you have to double move or lose.
Right. So clearly you have to look at the terrain and make sure you're not like unreasonably exposing your units on turn 4 or 5 or whatever. But generally, if you can set up a situation where you're, within range 1 of the KP before turn 6, it's better to be in that situation than just double moving.
Droids and compel, I think, are the two most powerful things for that turn 6 KP.
Yep.
Droids, because they still get their double action regardless of suppression. They need to be panicked to lose actions.
Right.
So they could always double move to the middle. And compel, again, for the same reason.
Same reason.
Units will be able to double move to the middle regardless of you suppressing them.
Yep.
So they're immune to that suppression game. Yeah.
All right. Anything else to say about KP?
No.
Tagging your opponent's home objectives is sometimes also very clutch.
Yep.
Or leaving the option open to tag your opponent's home objective.
Something you can do with like creature troopers or speeder units in particular.
Yeah.
Especially
Things
if your
that can
opponent
move
just
faster.
leaves like a strike team or something back there. Not only can something like a speeder or a creature trooper often just straight up kill that unit, but they can also sometimes score the KP
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah.
So please do not forget to score your home objective.
That happens,
It does.
It
in the
does.
panic of that end, right? Like how many
You get like hyper focused.
yeah,
on
we've
the
all done
middle.
it. Oh, I'm gonna
Yep.
pull this guy off. I'm gonna run double move him up to the middle, and then you go, oh yeah, I'm
Yep.
supposed to score mine.
Yeah. Whoops.
I think I did that at Gen Con. I was waiting too long to score mine, and then I moved a strike team. And I had to clamber down with the strike team, a 2-model unit, and they, on their clamber, both rolled blocks, and they died on their way to my home objective from clambering. And it was great. So great. Much fun.
With the clamber check. All right. Well, let's hit the last one in the core set, and that is Intercept the Transmissions.
Yeah, this one is a good one. I've played this one I think I played it twice at Nova, and then I mean I seem to play it seems to always come up, but basically, this one scores round 2, round 4, and then the end of the game. And that one always trips people up because the end of the game doesn't mean round 6. It means when the game is over. So, that's always tricky. One of my hints, and I think these guys would agree, is that a lot of times it's beneficial for you not to try to score round 2, to hold, let your opponent try to go after it, and then punish them for trying to take it for round 2. That's usually a really good move. Or inversely, like, John and I played that game at Nova, and he was able to score it behind line of sight blocking, and so that's a pain in the butt as well. But yeah, just keep thinking about that. John's very smart when he was picking his board edge, he was doing a lot of measuring, and he saw that if we picked a middle objective, that he was going to be able to score it from behind this huge line of sight blocking.
That has won me several games, honestly. Finding where your center point is and measuring range 1 from it is only relevant for intercept. But if it happens, then that table edge is very important.
Well, I would argue it's relevant for other ones too, because if there's a blocker within range 1 of the center, that could be relevant for things like recover. If you can jump over it and grab the box, KP, same situation where it's you can kind of hide more safely while you wait. So yeah, that's always a good thing to do, is figure out where the center is before you pick a table side. I like that you brought up, Jay, kind of just conceding is not the right word, but maybe not like taking unreasonable risks on that turn 2 scoring. Yes. Because the last scoring round is worth 2 points per objective, and I would argue that philosophy can also apply to turn 4, because if both players score their home objectives and one player scores the middle on turns 4 and 2, and the other player scores the middle on turn 6, then you are tied. That is going to be 6-6. Which
means is an extreme. It's very risky, because you have to absolutely capitalize or be able to capitalize attrition wise.
I think it's less risky than you think in certain situations. I've been pretty comfortable doing that a lot on Intercept. Because if your opponent it's very table dependent. I would say this applies more if the center of the table is like open. But if your opponent is like throwing units at the center on a relatively open table early in the game, like you shouldn't fret about trying to contest that center on 2 and probably also on 4. Like if you're, particularly if you have a list with a lot of firepower and you can just kind of punish those units for getting those early scoring, then that means 2 things. 1, you're probably going to end up on kill points because you're killing activations and your opponent is moving instead of attacking you. And 2, you're probably going to have more activations. Clearly you need to position yourself to do this on turn 6, but you're probably going to have more activations that can score the center on turn 6 because you're killing activations and your opponent isn't. So that's a long way of saying, like, don't be afraid to go for the tie and then just win on kill points if you find yourself in that situation. You have to, it's only worth 1 point on the first 2 rounds, so you have to really like assess how necessary it's going to be for you to score that. I've seen the center like not get scored at all on turns 2 and 4 sometimes in some games.
That's wild.
Where both players just kind of punt it. Like I said, that tends to happen more on open tables where you're just kind of like sacrificing a unit to score the middle, which is usually not a good idea. There are some weird situations where, depending on deployments, you might not have home objectives. Battle Lines is one of them. Disarray, potentially Danger Close, depending on how the terrain works out. Where like your opponent might have a better path to an objective that you would consider your home objective than you do. And if that's the case, then everything we just said is kind of out the window. Because there's 3 objectives that you're mutually vying for instead of 1, basically. So or if you have like fast units like creature troopers that can rush your opponent's home objective and score it, that's a different story too. So if you can like 3-0 your opponent on one of those turns 2 or 4, that's huge. Or even if you can 2-0 them, like if you can freeze an objective where it's just contested and then score the other 2 and go 2-0, there's a big difference between 2-0 and 2-1 on turns 2 and 4.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else on Intercept?
I'm trying to think of how to bring it up, because I've played several games where it's been extremely annoying when my opponent does this peekaboo action. They score on turn 2 and then turn 3 they move everything back again. And then they just like out of LOS, so I can't shoot it. So his units get punished a little bit, but they retreat.
Yep.
And then turn 4 they come back and again, just peekaboo right back away so they could score both times without straight losing any units. Wookiees are good at it, like things that don't die immediately are good at it, but it is, yeah, I don't know. I
No,
don't
that's
know that I
definitely a
would
thing.
recommend it for most armies, but
Yeah.
If you have the right unit for it, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind too, and this was probably something I may have sometimes I don't think about until it's too late, is that like if you're severely out activating your opponent, like sometimes the answer is just piling all in on the middle and just saying, all right, well, you can't kill everything. you know and I know it seems crazy, but sometimes that's just the answer, because you could have like 2 or 3 activation, maybe 4 activations on your opponent, and they're only going to be able to shoot so many things or attack so many things. So sometimes, especially on key positions and intercept, like just running towards the middle with everything that you have, not everything, keep your back position, but yeah, I don't know, just a thought. Sometimes that's the answer.
Yeah, and actually that brings up a good thought generally on all objectives, which is don't be afraid to use melee as a tool.
It's a very
Like,
powerful tool.
just even on units that like don't actually attack things with melee. Sometimes just tying up an opposing unit, double moving with like a B1 unit or something.
Yeah.
To tie up an opposing unit that needs to do something important on a critical turn, can win the game for you. So
It's a great way, for example, like on key positions, if you don't have, if you can't double move to get to the objective, you might be able to double move to tie up an opposing unit. So you can, that unit still prevents another unit from scoring, effectively scoring themselves. Or just, if you have a weaker unit that only has like 2 or 3 models, single wound models, jumping into melee with something probably will prevent it from dying, at least that turn.
Yeah.
If you're like in the middle intercept or on the middle KP.
Don't underestimate black dice either.
in melee,
Yeah.
When some
Yeah.
of these
Yeah,
rebels or stormtroopers can punch with black dice, even
Yeah.
if you're in melee with like a force user, like some people are like, oh, he's gonna withdraw, and I'm like, aim punch,
Yep.
like just like
Yeah, with precise
yeah, right.
and surges. Yeah. I had my last Invader game, I was playing Blizzard Force and my opponent had R2, and he tied up a heavy response storm unit near my deployment zone with R2, with the intent basically to like just try and hide there until he could score a secret mission near the end. And I was like, all right, aim punch. And they punched our dude, down to 1 wound basically. And then on the last turn, when he had tried to score, he only had 1 wound left. Like, all right, this is a perfectly acceptable use of stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rare occasions, you can even pull a unit off of the objective by getting into melee with it.
Yes, it's possible. You have to be like super. That feels like more of a 102 thing to me.
Yeah,
because you have to
yeah.
be super knowledgeable about the melee rules and how the timing works with like placing units down and stuff.
You have to
but-
cohere your other units such that they can't place their unit leader back in to base contact with the objective. And your unit leader needs to be inside.
Right.
But it has definitely won me a non-zero amount of games.
It's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on the KP and where your opponent's units end up and the shape of the objective and everything. So
Luke is gross at it because he just moves. He's like, oh, you're recohered now. I'm going to walk away and do it to someone else.
yeah. With disengage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's all I got.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that was the core set objectives. You guys got any final thoughts on this?
They're pretty solid. They
Yeah.
might be breakthroughs not as fun, but I like. They're 3 of my top 4.
Oldies but goodies.
Mhm.
I like Breakthrough. Breakthrough's fun. As long as you have speeders.
Yeah. I'm a rebel player. Like, I mean,
Yeah, that's fair.
You have speeders.
Yeah.
yeah, expensive speeders with 6 dice to attack with. Yeah.
Hey, don't diss the T-47. The
I'm not
T-47's
straight dissing them.
current absence has nothing to do with its attack.
Yeah.
Dude, it's so good. It's
It
so
really-
good.
I mean, I think it has more to do with just the abundance of critical, and then I do think it got pushed out a little bit by the spider ions.
Yeah.
It might be possible to try and
Yeah.
revisit it again. It definitely had like a heyday, kind of between that, the buff where it got surge crit on its gun
Up until spiders.
up until spiders released. Yeah, it was super.
Yeah.
good.
I could start list building with them again.
Something to think about. I don't think it would be great into like dodge spam. Clearly, you can run it with snipers and stuff anyway. But
Well, and like, yeah, you could flank.
Yeah.
Against the dodge spam. But
yeah, denying pikes and or rebel trooper captains.
they still get
cover.
one dodge. They get one defensive trick, but not both.
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Dodgers, but no cover.
Still helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Get that hot shot pilot out.
Yeah.
I think
Excuse
that
me.
thing's great. I don't see people running it when they run speeders.
For me personally, at least on, I mean, TTS is a different matter, but on real tables, which tend to have less area terrain, I think it's generally pretty trivial to catch things out of cover with T-47s, both between their height and their speed.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah.
It feels like I'd rather spend those points somewhere else, but
Maybe. I know we've had this discussion before.
yeah, we have. I could see the case for it. It's especially good into area terrain.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, next week. Yeah. I was trying to think if we had a guest next week. We do not have a different guest next week. That's
Nope.
2 weeks from now.
Yep.
We will talk about the other 4. So that would be the priority supplies, which is sabotage, the moisture evaporators, and then the 3 vital assets objectives, which I know people love. So that would be bombing run, hostage, and payload. I say that slightly tongue in cheek. I actually legitimately like the vital assets objectives.
They're
But-
very skewish. Well, 2 of the 3.
Yes, they are. I'm not sure that's necessarily
It's not bad.
a bad thing.
No, it's not.
I think
It's not.
we'll talk about this next
Yeah.
time, but yeah. There are some slight tweaks that you could make that would make them slightly less skewish, and they would still be super interesting and fun. But
Keep going. We'll talk about this next week. All right.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let me tell you. Let me tell you what I think about this.
I can't resist, Jay.
Yeah.
I can't resist telling people what I
That's-
think.
It's all right.
That's why
That's why we have podcasts.
I know. All right. Well, we are the notorious scoundrels of Kyle.
I'm Jay.
I'm John Bushfax Bushman.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.